The quest for self-identity has been an enduring task since the creation of man. Prolonged journeys, Buddhism, and yoga all promote that self-seeing linkage inside one's body, soul, and mind, inspiring enlightenment. But unlike the movies, even lifelong dedication to soul-searching does not assure the truth to be seen. Some have traveled the world hunting for clarification of who they are, but have fallen short and eventually died in the process. Both short stories, The White Horse and Woman Hollering Creek, can promote many topics but eventually divert back to the theme of searching for one's self-identity. The White Horse, by author Nguyen Ba Truc, entails the story of a presumably aged Vietnamese man by the name of Mr. Nguyen. At the time of the story, Mr. Nguyen is living in the United States during the period containing the fall of Saigon, his hometown. Throughout the story, Mr. Nguyen is found distracted by thoughts of his home life and family that often cause him trouble with the U.S. government for driving violations. It should be noted that the main protagonist, author, and even the story's translator all share the same name, Nguyen. This is a very common Vietnamese name, attributing to the point that Mr. Nguyen can be seen as just another ordinary man from Vietnam. The author uses this sense of ordinariness in order to draw out reader-character relations. The author hopes that his readers will see Mr. Nguyen as an average man whose identity is left somewhere in the past, causing the common homesickness. The search for self-identity in the story is centered on Mr. Nguyen's split body. In The White Horse, Mr. Nguyen is said to be mentally, not physically, in two different places at one time. The speaker states, "You can't say Mr. Nguyen lives in one place. Rather, he lives in two worlds. His soul is in America, but his spirit shuttles." Here, the speaker is referring to Mr. Nguyen's unbound memories that preoccupy him with ideas of life in Vietnam with his family. The speaker also sums up Mr. Nguyen's life in America by saying, "In America, heaven and earth are turning white." The speaker states that whether while driving or working, Nguyen's mind often drifts back to Saigon, even sometimes to other time periods than his own. This illustrates how Mr. Nguyen has given up on his time in America and is now just barely going through the ordinary routines of life. From this story, it is evident that Mr. Nguyen is in the wrong place. His mind and soul are longing for his family back in Vietnam, but his body is bound in a foreign land. Mr. Nguyen attempts to appease his dissonance by sending gift boxes back to Vietnam, though by doing so, he is ironically without any money to return. This leaves his mind to roam freely as a white horse, searching for his true identity, while his body remains in another world. The Woman Hollering Creek, by author Sandra Cisneros, is about a Latina woman named Clea Phyllis. Clea Phyllis is an immigrant to the United States that moves away from her family in Mexico to live in America with her believed great new husband, son, and unborn child. The story makes a drastic turn for the worse as Clea Phyllis' husband begins to abuse her, and it is by this felony that we see Clea Phyllis long for a self-identity. Growing up, Clea Phyllis had overblown expectations for life and romance due from the soap operas that she watched about love. However, once her husband begins to abuse her, she starts to see that her life is not what she thought it would be. The speaker confirms this by saying, Clea Phyllis thought her life would be like that, like a telenovel, only the episodes got sadder and sadder. She wonders about going home to her family, but thinks that by doing so, the people back home would gossip about her. Unfortunately for her, her livelihood depends upon her abusive husband, making it even harder for Clea Phyllis to leave him. Like Mr. Nguyen, she too is stuck in the middle of two oppositions. If she can only break free from her husband, then she too may find her true self and live the life she imagined as a child. Both of these stories, Woman Hollering Creek and The White Horse, are similar in that the characters are put into foreign situations and lands where they must either conform or react to the situations at hand. The White Horse uses many flashbacks and third-person narration to emphasize the struggles Mr. Nguyen has with the nostalgic memories of his dwindling past. These flashbacks are so common throughout the story that one can conclude that almost the whole story is a flashback, relating directly to how Mr. Nguyen is stuck in the past. However, Woman Hollering Creek uses a more chronological order, yet third-person narrative to describe the sequences of abuse and change Clea Phyllis undergoes. This chronological order is important because it emphasizes Clea Phyllis' ability to continue forward with her life, even when things are going wrong. This story also shares certain images of symbolism as the horse and creek from both stories run freely as they choose, epitomizing that a person is not subject to circumstances they are in, but has a choice to decide their own fate. Most deductions about soul-searching, like the ones present in both stories, lead to the basis that the road for self-identity is never definite or assured, but can only be continuously traveled. As for the protagonist's journeys in both the White Horse and Woman-Hawing Creek, their roads direct them back to their home life. For Cleophilus, her loveless life with Juan is perturbing, and eventually she returns back to her family in Mexico with her children, leaving her husband behind. On the other hand, Mr. Nguyen's mind is too preoccupied by the memories of his past life in Vietnam, causing him to never return.